Perfect. So just a couple slides to go through, and then I'll hop right into Flowsome, which is probably what everyone wants to see. So today we'll be reviewing the conflict detection, which is called impact analysis, and then merging those to your branch, repository, or maybe back into your dev sandboxes. I'll skip the agenda just to save some time. And then some of the benefits of version control. I'm not going to review all of these, but the biggest ones to me, one, single source of truth. I think that is huge for development teams, version control, which ultimately enables a lot of these features. Audit trails, parallel development streams, which as your Salesforce team grows, you're usually going to be working in multiple projects in parallel. With Flowsome's native repository, this also allows us to simplify rollbacks. And some benefits that are you can release faster, more efficiently, and then ultimately reduce the bugs that make it through production or through to production. Since Flowsome can detect with our merge conflicts all automated and manual changes, organizes that in a really easy fashion to understand what exactly is happening, ultimately just drives up the quality of your code that makes it to prod. So switching to the next slide here. So really conflicts, it's the nature of the beast. Regardless of what CI/CD tool you have, you're going to have conflicts. It's going to happen. And this is where developers are going to spend a lot of their time doing it. Just deciding, do I want this change? What's a real conflict? What isn't? Okay, this change looks good. So Flowsome really built this from the ground up, and this is really our bread and butter of how we address this. And hopefully you do see some time savings if you're already using Flowsome with our merge conflict detection. So again, I'm not going to really read this. I'll hop right into the demo. Now it's really time for the demo. Let me exit out this. And now I'm going to hop into Flowsome. And today I'm going to be clicking around a little bit. So if you're ever wondering like how I got to this process, I would definitely encourage you to meet with me at a later time so I can walk through that end-to-end process. But since we only have like 24 minutes left, I do want to show 4 different kinds of conflicts. The first one being is deploying to your target org. The second would be merging to a master branch, so your repository, maybe merging to a release branch, and then back promoting. So back promoting and merging to your target org, they're really one and the same. The difference is your target org will usually be going left to right. Back promoting is going to be going right to left. So with this, I'm going to show those 2 first. So if I click on a feature branch here, this is always best practice to run before any deployment. If you want to avoid overwrites and see what the implications are of you deploying, I always recommend this. So if we want to take this to integrated dev next, I'll always run that impact analysis. And I want to compare against the target org here, and we can run this. So this will take 30 seconds or so to load, and I wanted to show this in real time. So here we can see if I took this to integrated dev, Flowsome did detect a total of 7 conflicts. I'm not going to review all of these just for the sake of time, but the process really remains exactly the same no matter what component you're working on. So first, I'll start with the workflow field update. So if we click different, a pop-up screen is going to appear. And where Flowsome is really different than a lot of other solutions, your source file will always be on the left-hand side, but Flowsome always compares against the target org. And the reason we always compare against the target org is to detect those manual changes. In a typical Git flow or a Git repo, if you're making manual changes in that org, it's probably not going to be reflected in that repository. So your merge conflicts aren't going to pick it up. You're definitely at risk of an overwrite in that regard. Flowsome will always pick up those changes. So in this use case, if we notice that our description field is missing from the source file, this is definitely at risk of an overwrite. If you don't want to overwrite that, simply click this arrow, bring it back into the source. Any fields highlighted in green on the left-hand side, these are net new. So if that change was intentional and you like it, really no actions needed from the end user. When you deploy this, anything highlighted in green will eventually copy over. The values highlighted in yellow, these values, they exist in both files, but they're different. So again, if you didn't want to overwrite this null operation, click this arrow and bring it back into the source. So ideally, again, this is best practice. You would want to review this for every single conflict. For the sake of this, let's pretend we like those changes and we can save it. If you've been on a demo with me before, this is by far my favorite conflict to review, and this is the custom field. It's a pick list value, and I try to make this look super messy. With 31 differences in the file, usually Git has a really tough time deciphering what's right, what's wrong, what's a real conflict. Flosum, on the other hand, again, we all know green is new, red below is bad, at risk of an overwrite. But where Flosum is fundamentally different is we do a semantic comparison on the back end. So even though there's these white spaces here, Flosum's intelligent enough to know that leave that as a white space and compare Kentucky to Kentucky. Even with 3 white spaces, Minnesota to Minnesota. What usually happens within a Git repository for resolving conflicts, since these lines are missing, this value is going to bump up. And now you're going to be comparing Kentucky to Kansas, which that's not right. And what's going to happen is since everything bumps up, you get an entire file conflict. This is where I'm going to switch to Git and really show you what that would look like. This is another pick list value that I was able to get a conflict within in Git. And here's a great example where Georgia is on line 210 in the source, but it's also on line 185 in the target. I guess a rhetorical question for everyone, like, is that a conflict, or does Git have a really hard time understanding XML? Another great example, Canada is on line 205 and it's being compared to India. Like, that's not right when Canada's down here. So this is where, in that PowerPoint slide I showed, that developers can spend a lot of time resolving conflicts. This is really what I'm talking about. And again, this is just one component. Imagine like a permission set that could be upwards of 400,000 lines. If you have like a 2,000 line conflict, it's going to be so hard to decipher what's right, what's a true conflict, and then what you want and don't want. So using Flowsome with that semantic comparison, it's custom logic built out for every single component. So for this use case, we could just save it. And again, when you save it, it'll be reflected as merged here. And then the last component I do want to review is the Apex trigger. So this is going to be super useful. Lightning Web Components, classes, triggers, Apex pages. We do control the merge logic view. So if you click different here, with the second difference, you can see we're doing a block merge view. So with the added code, it's really an all or nothing. If you wanted to go line by line, and there is use cases for this, or are use cases, and click on the line merge view, and look how this is different now. So again, Flowsome ultimately always provides that end option to the end developer to decide what view they want. So for this use case, we could just save it. And then if I wanted to save it to the branch, you could select these 3 components and click save. For this use case, I'm not going to do it though, since I do have a hard stop at 9:30. So for this example, we pretend we hit save, click cancel, will take you right back to the branch. And for every conflict you resolve, this version within the branch level will update. So in addition to having version control at the repository level, we also have it within the branch too. So I'm going to pause here to see if there's any questions from the members on the phone before I move on to resolving conflicts with merging branches. All right. So merging branches is going to be useful. Let me switch to a slide really quick. So ideally within Flowsome, it's always best practice 1 branch per user story. So if you're in a sprint cycle, you could have upwards of 30 feature branches. Once this is all deployed to some sort of internal testing environment like QA or integrated dev, let's pretend QA gives a thumbs up. Naturally, it'd be pretty cumbersome to keep deploying 30 feature branches one at a time. So to make this easier, what we can do is merge this into a single release branch, making it way easier to manage, and you can keep reusing the same branch again and again. So you could deploy this to QA, then deploy it to UAT, and then production, and then maybe even back promote. So if I wanted to merge into a branch, I'm going to go back to my feature branch here. There's this merge branch option. And before you merge, if there are conflicts, you'll be prompted to resolve them before merging. That way there's no code overwrites any step in your process. So if I click merge branch here, I'll select an existing branch I want to merge into. I believe this one called demo. There's my demo merge branch. So here you can see that, what's this? For my components, they are no. So with the new component, there's no risk of an overwrite. There's no negative impact you could have with merging to that branch. But the fields that have conflicts here, that same screen is going to pop up if you run the impact analysis, and that same concept applies. So with that same workflow field update, I'll use the layout just to change it up. But here, your source file, again, the branch you're merging into, or the branch you want to merge is going to be on the left, and the branch you want to merge into is going to be on the right. So here, if I didn't want to overwrite that required field, again, just click it over, ensuring no code overwrites happen. For this use case, again, if we clicked save, it shows merge, and you can merge this to the branch. There are a couple options here. Customers have requested this in the past. So one, you could let Flosum just force the commit as is. So this is going to take the source file regardless. Like, you're not going to resolve any of your conflicts. You just deem that the source file is correct. That can save you time. But as best practice, I would say you always want to manually review that. Then the second option is you could save those merge components on your source branch. So if you resolve these conflicts, it will be saved within your 8.4 feature branch. You can do that. I would recommend maybe not doing that, just in case if you do resolve any conflicts you don't like, you still have that same source in your feature branch. You could remerge that and retry the conflicts. So two options there. They are optional, but either way, down below, you'll have those conflicts regardless. So again, if we merge these, then you just merge that feature into a release. Any questions around this before I show committing to a repository?
Quiet today.
All right, so we'll click cancel. And then I'm going to show you conflicts when committing to the repo. So I'll switch back to this diagram again. And ideally within Flowsome, after your release branch has been successfully deployed to production, then we commit to the repository. If the viewer's on the phone, if they're used to a typical Git flow, it's quite the opposite. Usually you're going to merge into the master and then deploy to production. Flowsome does it the opposite, just because it's an extra safety net. In this use case, what if the release branch was deployed to production and the business did not like those changes? So, like, we're not signing off on this. Within Flowsome, you just need to worry about that rollback in the org. If you were to do it within a Git flow and you merge to master and they don't like the changes, now you need to worry about reverting those changes in the repo and successfully rolling them back from the org. So that extra safety net can save you a ton of time. With that being said, Flowsome's repository ultimately only serves as your master branch. So you're really not going to have a QA branch, and dev branch, a UAT branch, just your master, which should ideally be as in sync with production as possible. So for the sake of time here, we have to use our imagination, but let's pretend that release branch we're on made it to production. Now let's practice committing to the repository. So again, if we pretend this is our release branch, business loves it, they sign off on it, now we can commit it to our repo. So if I click commit to repository here, Flosum, so these conflicts, this is a good use case too, I did want to show. You can see auto resolved here. And when auto resolve comes about is when that end user, so myself, one made that original commit in the repository, and then I'm committing that same component to the repository again. Flowsome's always under the impression that you, the end user, you know what the conflicts are, and ultimately we'll just take the source file. If you don't want to do that and you think manual intervention is required, just click on the auto resolve and it's going to be the same process. So here you can see before you commit, I would be overwriting that name field. If I did not want to do that and it's not intentional, again, click that back into the source. So even though it says auto resolved, you can still intervene and manually resolve those conflicts. With that being said, Flowsome, the auto resolved, usually in a lot of other competitor tools or Git flows, you'll see auto resolve for you. I've been burned in the past with that, where a tool kind of makes the assumption of what's right and what's wrong, and then eventually makes it to production like, well, where did that field go? The auto resolve kind of fixes it for you automatically. So ideally within Flowsome, whenever you see a conflict, it's going to be manual to resolve those, just because we put the power in the end user to decide what they want, what they don't want, and what's right and what's wrong. So this is really all I had to show for today for merge conflicts. By far one of my favorite topics to talk about, because this is really Flosome's bread and butter and how we are different. Within our native repository and our native version control, it really enables that view for impact analysis, pull request, the native repository, even the pipelines as well, since they are native. So all of that kind of feeds into that native version control that we offer out of the box.